Sir Keir Starmer has suffered a major rebellion over his stance on the Israel-Gaza war. I'm now joined by the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, to talk to us about Keir's rebellion. Peter, thank you for joining us here on TalkTV. We've been hearing from Matthew Lazarus today that actually this is a good thing for Keir Starmer because he's painted himself as a statesman, someone who's not afraid to take on the left of his own party. He's behaving like a prime minister in waiting. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think, the primary thing should be to keep account of the suffering in Israel and Palestine. But he has acted according to his conscience, just like backbenchers and quote-unquote rebels have acted according to theirs. And everything we know about politics respects leaders who are strong and consistent, even if they don't always agree with them on the principle. And that might be an example of this. And some commentators have made the comparison to Tony Blair in 2003 in Iraq, a very different set of circumstances, but also a rebellion, also a leader being challenged by his own party in a very tough way.
But I heard Wes Streeting, who was interviewed after the vote, saying that in fact passing this vote, one of the reasons he didn't support it was that passing this vote would make no difference, that of course Israel wouldn't just necessarily listen to the King's speech, even if it was amended. But surely if the amendment on the humanitarian pauses had passed as well, Israel wouldn't have listened to that. So doesn't it sort of, is Israel, you think, particularly listening to either what the Labour Party or what the government says on this issue, or are we really just trying to appeal to the Americans?
I think Israel is listening to America primarily, but also to Britain. I think the feeling in the Labour leader's office this week was that there are two amendments. The SNP one they felt was a bit of party politics, and that's why the leadership tabled their own amendment, which had much tougher language on the loss of life, which has obviously been immense after that terrorist attack a month ago that was wicked, 11,000 dead in Gaza. So trying to be pragmatic. I think, obviously, Keir Starmer's ended up in a fairly similar position to Rishi Sunak. But I think this does matter. It's more than just a few councillors resigning in Preston, as one person put it, because what Britain does has an impact in Israel and in America, even though, of course, America is a much bigger country with us with more clout. The other thing is Keir Starmer could be Prime Minister in fewer than 12 months.
Peter, the other thing to focus on, of course, is it's not just the 56 MPs who voted against this, but also the loss of Jess Phillips, Yasmin Qureshi, to name a few, from his top team, or certainly the shadow cabinet and shadow ministerial team. Do you think he's got the strength in his ranks to replace them? And which of the ones he's lost, not trying to be a trick question, do you think he'll miss the most? Is Jess a star he will be sorry to have left the pitch?
Well, we've got to be clear about what's happening. So the number of people who left the shadow cabinet was 0, and that's despite some predictions to the contrary beforehand. Clearly, all the MPs you cited are acting according to their conscience, but Jess Phillips has the highest public profile. Now, you need a different skill set. Sometimes you need people who are low profile and just plod away with the detail. That's often what makes a good government minister. But of course, you always want charismatic front men and front women, of which Jess Phillips is one. But it's telling to me that although resigning, she stressed it with sadness. She stressed she wanted Keir Starmer to be elected. And she was very positive about her language, so that she's being very sensible and mature about it. She's mindful of the electoral circumstances. But also that tells me this is not a left-right split in the Labour Party as we've seen in recent years. This is a bunch of MPs trying to navigate their way through incredibly difficult circumstances according to their values, and those are their constituents.
And of course, you're absolutely right to point out that this is a very, very difficult situation in Gaza. The Hamas terrorist attack that took place on Israel and the loss of civilian life in Gaza as well is a tragedy, not just for the people affected, but for the entire world. And it almost seems inappropriate to talk about the politics of it. But it is undeniable that in many seats around the country, there's a significant vote for the Labour Party, and this will be an issue that drives most of that vote. Do you think Keir Starmer, much of that vote, not most of it, much of it, do you think Keir Starmer's position that he's taken so close to the government, very close to the Americans, is going to damage the electoral prospects of the Labour Party in some of those seats in the North and the Midlands that they need to retain?
No, I don't think so. But you're right in what you say that the loss of life first in Israel 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then Palestine has been horrific. But we know we're going to have a general election in 12 months. Keir Starmer appears to be the favourite to win that. So what he does, the decisions he makes with his party, are of increasing importance. And looking at the polling, so Times YouGov poll out today, fairly regular. The poll leads about 20% or so still. And then I think it was covered certainly on Labour list, Savanta early this week. Labour's lead among all Muslim communities around the UK is still, they're still polling about 66%. And I think I'd take you to a wider point. It's a point I made at the start, that the public are very suspicious of people who change their mind and blow over the wind. We know that was one of the attack lines of Greg Hands, a former Tory party chair. So for Keir Starmer to say, these are my values, this is what I want to do in the Middle East, gave a very long speech a fortnight ago at Chatham House explaining that, and then engage with people in a pragmatic and in a calm way, bearing in mind he used to be a barrister. People will respect that because they see it as strength and consistency, even if they don't follow him on all the detail or agree with him on all of that.
So you sort of go back to the point Matthew's been making on the programme today. It's not one necessarily I disagree with. Greg Hands, former Conservative Party chairman, of which I am also one, went to the trouble of having a pair of flip-flops made with Keir Starmer's face on. So maybe those flip-flops will be consigned to the political junk shop of history. But we may look back at this, and I would accept this even as a Conservative Member of Parliament, we may look back at this and say, this is the moment that Keir Starmer truly broke away from the Corbyn legacy, with troubles with anti-Semitism, with divisions in the Labour Party, and led for the first time. Very interesting to see if the British public would reflect on that. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. That's been really insightful